Hey, I'm Pastor Caleb Schrader. I'm here with Jen Kennedy, and we are talking about this year's art installation. This is our third year doing this.
Yes.
And I started talking with you guys, I think in October this year, about love incarnate. And I shared with you some of the notes, some of the ideas that we had about Jesus coming and fully embodying what God had commanded, what God required of us.
Right.
And I asked you guys to come up with something. And this is one of the first things that you guys put in at the church here.
Right.
So talk me through a little bit about how you guys came up with the idea for stained glass, where that came from, and then how you put it all together.
Well, AJ and I have talked a lot of times about different ideas we would want to do to sort of bring the work together, as well as bring people together to work. So AJ wanted to do this as, we've kind of looked for the word, but like as stained glass inspired. So each piece that comes out will be stained glass inspired. And these, they're like, I don't know what to call these things, but they're what you would put on your glass house. Mm-hmm. You know, they had them in their backyard. I don't know why. So there was a zillion of them. So we said, well, maybe we could paint these. And AJ wanted to go big. So we went big, which was a lot more than we thought it was going to be. But it was very fun. And then she pretty quickly, what we did is we sort of had team leaders that would then head up the project, and then they could pull in as many people as they wanted to. So AJ and I worked together on this piece. And then we had other groups working together on other pieces. And then we pulled in lots of people. It was hard to even count how many people helped us because the frame had to be built and lots of squares had to be painted, and the black did not want to be black, so it had to be painted a lot of times. And so there was a lot of things that just needed people who love and want to help to come help. So it was pretty exciting that way. It was a lot more work than we thought it was going to be, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, AJ said probably 160 man hours once you had everybody's hours together for these first two pieces.
I think that was actually a low estimate because they guessed about 160, and we still had like 2 more days that we worked on it.
Oh, wow. And so basically what you're telling me is you guys invented this medium also,
yes.
Right? The panels there for putting on top of a roof so the sun can shine through.
Right.
And so you guys decided to paint on those and then to backlight it.
Right. So I worked on the artwork, just figuring out what we would put on it, and AJ worked on trying to figure out what would actually stay on here and be see-through. So that actually was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be because there was just a lot of options. But what we found, she ended up finding that acrylic worked on it if we stuck extra media in the acrylic, but not water, because sometimes it would bubble up, and it was quite an experiment of, so, and then the backlighting, that was also an experiment, how we were going to do this, how were we going to build it, how were we going to set it up. So, yeah.
I remember even once it was built, it was, how are we going to get it to the church now?
Exactly.
We even had to figure that out.
Because they're 12-foot long pieces, and we had weather that week. So
yeah. So one of the neat things about this installation is it's full of symbolism. Mm-hmm. And the symbolism ties into the messages that we're sharing about love incarnate. So can you help people who are watching the video make the connections? What are some of the symbols that we have in this piece here?
So this piece was supposed to be love the Lord your God with all your heart. Mm-hmm. So, the simple one was a heart. Mm-hmm. But just the fact that as far as my thinking on this, one, when you have a newborn baby, the amount of love that you feel at that moment. But I always think specifically that even though Christ gave himself to become a baby in that moment, the Father had to really intellectually give up a lot to trust even nice human people with the baby, because we make mistakes all the time. We get frustrated, we miss, we don't see, and so for the Father to trust, and for Jesus to say, I trust you to put me into a family and let me be completely helpless amidst that family, there's an immense amount of him showing his love in that. So that was the idea of just that moment. You think, how much I know it was about Christ and how much he gave, but Mary and Jesus and each one of them, how fully they had to live their lives for God to have this moment happen, and then the original piece had symbolism in it of different things he did in his life. But the Macy's and I were working together, or the Macy's and AJ and I were working together, and they had symbolism in theirs, which was similar to symbolism in ours. So we decided to do the 2 side pieces with the same set of symbolism, because we felt like those things symbolize what would happen. So in the side pieces, one more thing about this. AJ really wanted the idea of the heart, and even behind the heart, to have the behind the heart being the purple of royalty, and the heart itself being gem-like, of just the rich nature of such a small birth. Like how God sees service versus how we see service.
Yeah.
And then
I wanted to mention something too. You were talking about how Jesus entrusted himself to Mary and Joseph, and it's interesting because when he's grown and the people want to come make him a king, it says he didn't entrust himself to man because he knew what was in their hearts. And so he did entrust himself to Mary and Joseph as a feeble baby, totally dependent upon them, which shows just a deep love, but also affection even for his parents.
Right. Yeah, like medieval art often wants to make Jesus have an adult-like head so that he can be smart, But I feel like even I love the hymn "Away in the Manger," but no crying he makes isn't true.
No.
Like he was a baby, and I just think the fact that he trusted his father to allow him to be a baby and all the things that meant is kind of more than I think we can grasp.
Yeah.
So then on the sides, there were 7 symbols that the Macy's had, and then we added an 8 because we noticed they had a similarity. There's the crown and the animal, and then the communion and the lamp, both kind of having to do with prayer, and then the rose and the olive, and the shield, and the Alpha and the Omega being victory. And I kind of noticed that one of them is a little bit more on the earth side of things, even though the crown of thorns turning into a heavenly crown, and the lamb who seems so humble is really also the lion, and the sacrifice of his body being a holy incense to the Lord. I don't remember what we were thinking about the olive and the rose, but and then the shield being victorious, where the Alpha and the Omega being symbolic. So we kind of like the idea that it gave that those crossovers, so that's why we put them opposite each other to kind of give that fullness to these ideas. So
that's awesome. And one of the things that's neat about it is Sunday mornings, as we're preaching, people can look at this and they can meditate on these concepts. Our other art installations, we've done them all out in the hallway as sort of an entrance into, but this is something that people can even meditate on in the context of the sermon and be thinking about it.
Right, and that was, I do that a lot. I doodle during sermons because it helps me concentrate, but I also find my ideas getting woven into those pictures, and I find that that's a helpful thing for me to look at pictures and to be thinking of ideas, and they start weaving together. And I think sometimes when you hear Lamb of God, but when you really think or meditate on Lamb of God, and then you're also hearing about his sacrifice and his willingness to be sacrificed, that all starts, God speaks more into that, because it's not like we've talked about this, it's not you or I that's necessarily communicating an idea. God's the one that's communicating an idea in you, and he uses whatever he's going to use at that particular moment to communicate what you need to feed on.
Yeah, one of the things I love about preaching is trying to evoke images in people's minds. That's really what I'm trying to do, because I'm a visual person too. Right. But what I love about images is you're using a different part of your brain for seeing than you are for hearing.
Right.
And so I always in my classroom would allow my students to doodle, because I realized, hey, that's actually helping them engage.
Right.
That's helping them stay engaged. Some of them were very kinesthetic, so just doing something with their hands would help them actually listen better. And then some of them were actually engaging with what I was teaching by drawing pictures. Right. And the pictures won't always be like a one-to-one correspondence, drawing the graph, but it helps them to engage, helps them to think about what's being said. And so learning, it's a multi-dimensional experience, and so we gotta have that. Somebody wrote the very first week we had these up, they said, can we have these up all year long? So our church actually looks a little bit like a church right now, because we have some stained glass in there.
I've had a lot of people come up to me and say that, how excited they are about the stained glass. I'm like, maybe we could have stained glass in our future, But there's something I find, like there's one church, a Presbyterian church in the Mulholland area, and they have this beautiful stained glass, which is supposed to talk about the first day I think it's the first day of creation, where God hovered over the water. So you have it has gold and it has blue, and it's just a swirl. So it's nothing that would necessarily stop you from thinking about anything that's being talked about, but just that swirl of color. It, like, to me, there's so much to think about in that, in the way that they swirl, and it's so vibrant and so beautiful. I think sometimes it is really helpful to have something to pin your ideas to visually. So.
Yeah. One of the things I love about it, and I've shared it with our congregation before, but I'm going to reiterate it right here, is that worship is using what God's given us for His glory. Right. And so I love to be able to give artists that opportunity in our church service to show this is a skill, this is an ability God's given me, and I want to use it for His glory. And I appreciate you guys putting in all of the hours to make this happen, so we can enjoy the gifts that God's given you. Right. And it's neat how it brings the whole body together too, and that's what every gift does. Right. It brings us together around projects, around work, around meditations, around truths. As we draw near to Jesus and we comprehend who He is, we look more like Him, and we draw near to each other.
Well, and it was sweet, like you said, you gave us that work in October, so we all were able to really think about and chew on these ideas before coming up with an idea, and that really made us all think about this idea longer, which is one of the things that I've really enjoyed about these art projects, or even any time that I would talk in front of people or anything. It's like you spend a longer time. I feel like sometimes God does that to me so that I would have to think about it longer and chew on it and really let it settle into me, instead of be like, oh, that was fun, and move on, Yeah. So that was a really neat part of the project. Yeah.
So. It's sometimes when I spend a lot of time meditating on the concept before I actually get to preach on it, that's a problem, because I can't get it all out. But with the art, you just went bigger, right? 7 feet. So then you have just plenty of space, but I can't create more time. But well, thank you so much for sharing with us. And if you haven't seen it yet, come on down and check out our stained glass art installation here at Faith Community. God bless.